We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research, and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the center of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 14th of May 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist. I'm Vincent McAviney. Coming up.
Today we reaffirm this important bond and we take the next steps to make our relationship closer, stronger, and more powerful than ever before.
Trump's first foreign trip through the Middle East is proving rewarding for investment in the US, but is it also lucrative for his family firm? Plus, he may be about to get a new luxury 747, but what's gone wrong with air traffic control and commercial aviation in America? Then,
we typically print about 10 or 11,000 badges for people, so that's the amount of people that come in and do something in order to put this all in place.
Love it or loathe it, Eurovision is back this week. We hear from the man running the show about what it takes to pull off one of the world's biggest TV spectacles. Plus, we'll review the day's papers and get the latest fashion news. That's ahead on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. US President Donald Trump has said he will lift sanctions on Syria ahead of an expected meeting with its leader Ahmed al-Shara. Volodymyr Zelensky says he hopes the White House will come to understand that Vladimir Putin is the real obstacle to a peace deal, given the Russian leader is yet to confirm attendance at talks in Turkey this week. And Celine Dion has made a rare appearance during the first semi-final of the Eurovision Song Contest with a brief pre-recorded message. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. But first, Donald Trump has kicked off his whistle-stop Middle East tour in Saudi Arabia, declaring that the United States has no stronger partner than the kingdom. The two sides have already announced a $142 billion arms deal, as well as a raft of other investments that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman claims could eventually be worth $1 trillion. To discuss this first major trip of his second term, we're joined now by CNN's Abu Dhabi-based correspondent Paula Hancox. Paula, great to have you making your debut on Monocle Radio. What have the last 24 hours of this trip been like?
Hi, Vincent. Thanks for inviting me. Well, it has been very interesting seeing the US president in Saudi Arabia. Much of it is as was expected. A lot of pomp and ceremony, the royal purple carpet rollout, a motorcade ride escorted by the cavalry of Arabian horses, 21-gun salute, all of the pomp and ceremony that Saudi Arabia knows this US president loves. Now, of course, as well, there have been some eye-watering figures when it comes to the investments that Saudi says it is going to put into the US economy. You mentioned there this arms deal, $142 billion on paper. Now, of course, we don't have all the details of that. A lot of it is memoranda of understanding, letters of intention, but certainly the numbers are significant. And this is what we were expecting. This is why Donald Trump chose Saudi Arabia as his first official foreign trip, apart from, of course, the Pope's funeral in Rome, because he knew it was going to be an easy win. He wants these massive figures being announced, the headlines being announced. He knows he's not going to meet any protests in these countries. He knows there's no contentious meetings with these leaders. And this is exactly what he was hoping for.
And do we know much yet about the other investment deals and if there's been any talk of the tariffs that he imposed?
Well, certainly we are expecting to see a number of further investments. The defense ones you mentioned are obviously the crucial ones. We know that Saudi Arabia wanted more investment in the defense of the United States to have the reassurance of the security that the US can offer Saudi Arabia. They have very much put their external security into the hands of these US weapons makers. Of course, on top of that, you have the technology side. There was a massive Saudi-US investment forum that the US president spoke at as a keynote speaker, and there was pretty much every leader of tech companies around the world that you could see, or certainly in America, including Elon Musk, of course. And there were deals in AI. We're expecting more in cryptocurrency. These deals will continue over the next few days as well. He's heading to Qatar. He'll be going to the UAE. And this is really the crux of what he is here for.
And this is quite a step change for the kingdom's relationship with the US from the Biden administration's frosty approach.
Absolutely. I mean, Joe Biden, the former US president, said he wanted to make Saudi Arabia a pariah after the murder of the Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Now, of course, he did actually meet Mohammed bin Salman in the end, the Crown Prince, and those relations recovered somewhat, but it is a much different approach that you can see just how close these two men are, the Crown Prince and the US president. The speech we heard from the US president was gushing, to be honest, and this is what we will expect going forward as well. But it isn't just what the US can secure from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has also secured concessions from the US. For example, for Saudi Arabia, it was very important that sanctions be lifted on the new Syrian government. We know Saudi Arabia and Qatar have actually paid some of the WTO debts for Syria. We know Qatar's paying some of the public sector salaries for Syria, trying to get it back on its feet. And this was one of the key issues that the Crown Prince was going to put to Donald Trump. And we saw that he did secure what he was wanting to secure, the fact that the US is now planning to lift those sanctions.
And that's a real sort of part of the change that's come to Saudi Arabia, hasn't it, in recent years since Donald Trump's first trip there in his first term, that it's become much more of a collegiate player on the world stage and in the region.
It has, and it is dramatic, the change we have seen in its international standing, for example, since that murder of the Washington Post journalist, which US intelligence did say that the Crown Prince was aware of or possibly even ordered. So it is a huge change. We are now seeing Saudi Arabia as a key interlocutor, a key mediator when it comes to some of the most significant conflicts on the planet, whether it is Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, Russia. We've seen these US-Russian talks being hosted by Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has good relations with China, with better relations than it did have with Iran. So it's really put itself into the center of all of these key strategies, agendas, policies of the US government, and is really making itself, certainly in the US president's mind, as key to solving many of these issues. So the turnaround you see in Saudi Arabia is really quite dramatic.
And the Qataris are attempting to gift Trump a luxury 747 plane. Have there been any ostentatious gifts offered by their rivals, the Saudis?
Well, certainly nothing on that level. I mean, a jet that's worth some $400 million has, as you can imagine, raised a number of eyebrows, even among those in the Republican Party. Some of Trump's allies are questioning what on earth he is thinking of when he's saying that he is going to accept this gift from the Qatari government. Now, we know that there is obviously the pomp and ceremony. We don't know what is being promised behind the scenes. We can report to you what is being very publicly noted at this point. But I mean, an interesting factor of this is CNN did an investigation looking at the Trump family's business ties to the Middle East, which have more than tripled since the president's first term in office. We know that members of the US president's family have done significant multi-billion dollar deals in Saudi Arabia and other Gulf nations. So certainly it has been lucrative for the family. We hear from the US president that is different to what he is doing, that he is not running those businesses. But of course, we do see a number of ongoing plans for luxury skyscrapers, golf courses. There's significant cryptocurrency deals being done by the Trump family in these countries that the US president is now visiting.
And the president is heading to Qatar next, later today. What can we expect from that stop? And there's been some upset in Israel that the country isn't getting paid a visit this time.
Yes, I think certainly Israel is feeling left out, especially when you consider what is happening at this point. The fact that the US president has just agreed to lift sanctions on Syria, for example. I mean, Israel has been carrying out and escalating its military and territorial advancements in Syria. And then its ally, Donald Trump, then lifts the sanctions. So certainly that would not have been welcomed. We see the US talking to Iran at this point, which we know that the Israelis do not support. They would like to just be able to target the nuclear ambitions of Iran and not deal with any diplomacy or niceties. And then, of course, the Edan Alexander, who was the last known living American hostage still being held in Gaza, he was released just before the US president came to the region. And that was a deal that was done between Hamas and the US. Israel was not part of that. So again, it was left out of that particular negotiation. Now, of course, we haven't heard any public pushback from the Israeli Prime Minister. He's not going to be doing that to his US ally and who he considers a good friend, Donald Trump. But they will be concerned by the fact that these deals are being done without them, that deals are being done that they don't believe puts them in a good position to be able to defend themselves. And of course, they are not being visited on this particular occasion. This is simply for the Gulf nations. Vincent?
Paula, thank you. That was CNN's Paula Hancock. This is The Globalist. It's 7:12 here in London and 2:12 in Newark. The White House has announced an emergency task force to fix the telecom outages at Newark Airport's air traffic control to prevent more hazardous incidents which have shaken passenger confidence. To discuss the issue, we're joined by Paul Charles, founder and CEO of the PC Agency. Paul, for international listeners who may not be aware, what's been going on at Newark?
It's an embarrassment, really, for Newark Airport, which is one of America's biggest. It's New York's second biggest after JFK, and has been suffering from chronic delays and cancellations in the last few weeks due to a shortage of air traffic controllers and aging equipment which the Transportation Secretary has described as being off the set of Apollo 13. It's that old in most cases. So passengers have faced many delays, cancellations, unpredictable journeys, and it is a crisis of confidence at this enormous airport.
And why has this been allowed to happen? Is it commercial providers running it, not investing, or is it the government's fault?
Well, a blame game has obviously begun between the Transportation Secretary in the Trump administration, Sean Duffy, and his predecessor under the Joe Biden administration, saying that not enough money was put into this aging equipment, that it's been known about for a long time. But it's fair to say that there have been a number of problems which have led to this, retiring air traffic controllers who are stressed because of the pressure they're under from having to deal with more flights and pressure from the aging equipment, which is leading to planes literally not being able to be contacted or not being able to be tracked on some of the radar systems. Also, the DOGE approach to removing staff has led to a shortage of air traffic controllers, where sometimes there should have been 20 of them on duty involving Newark, and only 3 of them have been on duty. So it really is a very, very important but substantial crisis of confidence in Newark Airport.
And are we seeing these issues at any other airports in the US?
Well, the shortage is nationwide, so it has been affecting some airports with cancellations, but not as much as Newark. Newark is in the firing line. It's such a high-profile airport. So many domestic flights come into it, obviously some international flights as well. And it's a showcase of American aviation, or should be. Luckily, JFK has been less affected. This has been about a change in the communication system involving Newark Airport and moving air traffic controllers to Philadelphia. And that has been the nub of this issue, that the communications between Philadelphia and Newark have just not been up to standard at all. And that's enabled air traffic controllers to be highly stressed because they haven't been able to guarantee the quality of the communications with aircraft who are coming in to land or taking off at Newark. So that's why Newark's been most affected.
And it seems remarkable, an airport in a city which knows why aviation security is so important would end up in this state. And this year, of course, we've had the tragic collision between a commercial flight and a military helicopter in Washington, D.C. Do we have any data on how American flyers are feeling?
They're feeling very nervous, especially those using Newark. And in fact, the CEO of United Airlines has been very vocal about the need to cut its own schedule at Newark because flyers are choosing to fly elsewhere. So there's undoubtedly a crisis of confidence among consumers. They're nervous, they're worried that their flights will simply fall off the radar, as it were, and that there could be another major incident. Now, that hasn't happened, but by all accounts, talking to air traffic controllers involved, that's only through pure luck. So this is why the task force is meeting today. The Transportation Secretary has to revive confidence, has to prove he has a plan for upgrading the number of air traffic controllers, but that takes time. It takes time to train them. So that's no quick fix. And over the next 4 weeks or so, if you're flying into Newark, just check your plans, because there will be a lot more cancellations. They're limiting the number of flights that will be handled at Newark each day. And of course, they're installing new fiber optic equipment to try and upgrade the technical issues that they've been facing, so they won't happen again. But certainly for the next month, Newark is an airport where there will remain a crisis of confidence.
And Transport Secretary Sean Duffy has been directing criticism towards the previous administration, particularly his predecessor, Pete Buttigieg, someone who is already looking like a leading contender for the Democratic nomination in 2028. Is that fair criticism, or is that potentially more political? Is this a problem that's just built up over decades because, as many people who've flown through America will know, their airports have faced sort of chronic underinvestment for a long time?
Yes, Congress first, in fact, pointed out that the computer systems were struggling as far back as the 1990s. So this is not something that has emerged in recent weeks. So it's not fair for the Transportation Secretary to go after the last one, to go after his predecessor. This has been going on for decades, but it's come to a head partly because of cutbacks by DOGE and the efficiency drive, partly because of the demand for flying. There's just a need for more air traffic controllers who at the moment simply aren't out there. They don't exist because they've not been trained. And so it's unfair, I think, for this to be a political blame game. Interestingly, in one of the news conferences that's been held recently by the Transport Secretary, he put on show some of the aging equipment. He said the gear looks like it came off the set of the movie Apollo 13, and he compared it to a 1967 Volkswagen Beetle. It's that old, and that, as you can imagine, does not inspire confidence in the passengers who are choosing Newark.
Best to avoid for the time being. Paul Charles, thank you very much. Still to come on the programme. That That intro can only mean one thing. Eurovision week is upon us. Stay tuned. This is The Globalist.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS House View, you get the big picture in bite-sized articles, delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts, all focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals. UBS, banking is our craft.
Well, let's continue now with today's newspapers, and I'm delighted that joining me in the studio is Simon Brooke, journalist and communications consultant. Simon, good morning. What's caught your eye?
Well, the Financial Times has an interesting piece, given that we have these talks in Turkey tomorrow aimed at creating a sort of roadmap for peace between Russia and Ukraine. One of their Washington correspondents, Guy Chazan, is looking at the fact that we're seeing a change in attitude from the Trump administration on this, who is right and who is wrong, really, in this conflict between Ukraine and Russia. He points out that when J.D. Vance was asked about the war in Ukraine at a foreign policy forum in Washington last week, diplomats were expecting some sort of MAGA-style criticism of Kyiv and what's described as a veiled sympathy for Russia, but instead they heard something quite different. And Vance said that the Russian proposals to end the conflict were, he said, asking an example of Russia asking too much. And so obviously this caused real surprise. So the piece is really looking at the fact that the Trump administration is beginning to understand that it's really Putin's intransigence here that is the real obstacle. And there are some interesting quotes in the piece, the FT piece, from experts. You hear the frustration in his communication, says Michael McFaul, who was a former US ambassador to Russia. He may be understanding that he's given too much and not got anything in return, he says, of Trump. Trump is concluding that Putin is not a friend of the US, according to Bill Taylor, who served as the US ambassador to Ukraine from 2006 to 2009. There's a recognition that he is not to be trusted and is not negotiating seriously. So obviously there's constant changes, complete unpredictability around the Trump administration's attitude to Russia and Ukraine. But it is interesting if, given that run-up to the talks in Turkey tomorrow, this is a theme, this concern about whether it's Russia that is the villain here.
I mean, it's only taken him the sort of 25 years that Putin has been in power to realise that he's not the most trustworthy. Do you think that this is simply them being face-to-face with the problem, realising and accepting the facts, or is it just that they can't sort of pretend anymore the way that they were doing before, that their view on the situation was correct? Yeah,
I think the piece points out that, that when Trump came into power, his team reckoned that all they had to do is be nice to Putin, compliment him a bit, put some pressure on Zelensky, who they already felt was on the back foot, and then, there would be an agreement between the two. But that clearly is not happening. Interesting, I've been reading comments that have suggested that one of the reasons why the Trump administration has always been so favourable to Putin and Russia is that actually quite a lot of the finance for the Trump family businesses comes from Russian sources. And so this is one of the reasons why Trump is keen to keep the Russians on side. But interesting, the piece points out that some of the Trump allies on the Hill are taking a tougher approach as well. Senator Lindsey Graham, who's long been a Trump ally, said that he had bipartisan support for a bill that would provide what he described as bone-crushing sanctions on Russia, and this includes a 500% tariff on imports from countries that buy its oil and gas. So it'll be interesting to see if Washington maintains this tough line.
Now, turning to someone in Donald Trump's cabinet, RFK Jr., who, it's being reported in the last day, took his grandchildren swimming in a DC creek contaminated with sewage, bacteria and E. coli. Making America healthy again. Now, there is a criticism, though, of his attack on pesticides. Some fear disruptions to the food supply.
Yeah, so obviously he doesn't seem to be that bothered about where he takes his young ones for a swim, but he is concerned, as you say, about pesticides. And the Wall Street Journal has this exclusive reporting that there's pushback from some White House and agency officials who are concerned that the move would disrupt the food chain. And Kennedy is spearheading a coming report, as you say, Make America Healthy Again. He has previously campaigned on removing pesticides from the food supply chain, the Wall Street Journal reminds us. But some officials at the Environmental Protection Agency, which regulate pesticides, also officials at the Agriculture Department, have really cast doubt on Kennedy's desire to cast weed killers as harmful to health. And the paper reminds us that Trump did support an investigation into pesticides in an effort to win support from Kennedy's backers. So it's interesting, if Kennedy was useful to him on the campaign trail, bringing in those extra supporters, is he then a risk, a danger when he's in office? I think the problem is that if Kennedy does take some very strong and sudden action, of course, will we see this problem with the supply chain? And will it end up with food prices rising or even empty supermarket shelves? The kind of things which could really be very damaging for the Trump administration.
Crossing the Atlantic to France now, they do love a bloody long TV interview, don't they? I can't imagine a British Prime Minister ever agreeing to a 3-hour interview last night. What did we learn from Emmanuel Macron?
Well, given that it's Emmanuel Macron who thrives on this kind of grilling from journalists and members of the public, as you say, a real marathon, all kinds of things were thrown out. He looked at everything from mental health suffered by young people to the wearing of the veil in sports. One of the things that Le Monde pulls out, and other reports do as well, is talking about a series of referendums, perhaps on one single day, for voters to describe on various, to give their views on various controversial French social and economic reforms. So they could, for instance, French voters could be invited to give their opinions on access to social media for under 15s, right through to assisted dying. Interestingly, as Le Monde points out, Macron rejected the idea of putting immigration or his controversial 2023 pension reforms to a popular vote. I think that could be very difficult for him. But he was also talking about Ukraine as well, and arguing that European countries could impose a new package of sanctions within days if Russia doesn't agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine. So
that's really interesting, because the experience from this country for a lot of world leaders is to avoid referendums at all costs because they remain so divisive. But is this a trick for him, given his lack of support in Parliament, to try and get public support to pressure the legislature?
I think it may well be, yes. And I mean, as Le Monde points out, his critics have said, well, hang on, you're coming up with these ideas now. You've been in office since 2017. Why haven't you done things before? But I think there's a real sense that, unfortunately, especially now Macron has lost control, or his party, his supporters, have lost control of the French Parliament. He is something of a lame duck presidency. So, as you say, perhaps this is a way, if he can't get these things over the line himself, then perhaps one way he could do it would be through referenda.
And finally, just briefly, a new book you're wanting to draw our attention to, taking us behind the scenes at the Louvre. Yeah, this is a lovely review of a book, How to Fall in Love with the World's Greatest Museum, as you say, about the Louvre. 30,000 works of art, 780,000 square feet of exhibition space. It would take, if you wanted to see every every item in the museum, it would take you'd end up walking 9 miles through some 400 rooms. Yeah, I just thought summer holidays approaching. Reading this just made me think, I think almost every British, Irish school child has been to the Louvre at some point. We all want to go back, don't we? Well, see...
Or do we?
Musée d'Orsay. Go over the river to the Musée d'Orsay. It's less busy. It's a gorgeous building. Yeah. It's a tighter collection. I would recommend stepping over there.
Or do both. They're very
near.
Do
both if you've got time. But yeah, Simon Brooke, thank you very much. Here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. US President Donald Trump has said he will lift sanctions on Syria ahead of an expected meeting with its leader Ahmed al-Shara. Trump said the change would give Syria a chance at greatness, and it was met with celebrations in Damascus. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he hopes the White House will come to understand that Vladimir Putin is the real obstacle to a peace deal. Despite frantic diplomacy in recent months, the Russian leader is yet to confirm his attendance at proposed talks in Turkey this week. And Celine Dion has made a rare appearance during the first semi-final of the Eurovision Song Contest in Basel with a brief pre-recorded message. The star won the contest for Switzerland in 1988. The semi-final saw 10 acts qualify for Saturday's grand finale, including the Swedish runaway favourite. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now, time for one story we're following today. Monocle's executive editor, Chris Lord, has been exploring the rejuvenation of one of San Francisco's most prominent landmarks, the Transamerica Pyramid.
When the Transamerica Pyramid was built in 1974, it was not so popular with San Francisco locals. There were protests against the building of William Pereira's futurist tower, perceived to be a corporate blot and a symbol of the encroaching power of banks and big business on this once bohemian downtown. Nevertheless, people did eventually warm to the pyramid when it opened, and it's become as much a part of the furniture as the Golden Gate Bridge. Yesterday, a time capsule buried when the first towering struts were sunk into the ground went on display in the pyramid. It included letters both for and against the construction, period advertisements, and even the original recipe for the Pisco Punch cocktail. The capsule was unearthed last summer during an extensive restoration led by Foster and Partners, and its unsealing is timely. The city's downtown is undergoing another extraordinary turn of the screw. The last 5 years have been tough on San Fran after its tech businesses switched to remote working, leaving the urban core desolate and blighted with crime and boarded-up businesses. The restoration of Transamerica, funded by its new owner and developer Michael Chavot, has been something of a beacon for a slow-burn revival, with the new mayor and a number of private and public organisations trying to bring fresh purpose to the city centre. As with the opening of this capsule, many are starting from the ground up.
That was Monocle's executive editor, Chris Lord. For more from Monocle's editors and correspondents, why not sign up to our free daily newsletter, The Monocle Minute, at monocle.com/minute. Now, it's 15:32 in Tokyo and 7:32 here in London. Japanese car maker Nissan has reported a huge $4.5 billion loss for the fiscal year, its first deficit since 2021. In response, the company has unveiled a dramatic restructuring plan, Re-Nissan, that includes closing 7 factories worldwide and cutting 20,000 jobs, 15% of its global workforce. So what's next for Japan and Asia's auto industry? Hans Greimel, Asia editor at Automotive News, joined me on the line from Tokyo now. Hans, why has Nissan faced such a significant deterioration in performance?
Well, Nissan has a very high cost structure, and over the last couple of years, it's really had trouble delivering on the volume and the sales performance to make good on that. So it's had faltering revival plans for going on, let's say, 4 years now, and it really tripped up last year when it slumped to a quarterly loss, and that triggered a new round of revival plans that just didn't have enough gumption in it, and it eventually led to the resignation of the outgoing CEO and the installation of a new CEO, Ivan Espinosa, a Mexican national who took the helm on April 1st.
And what's the current sort of overall situation and common challenges for Japan's automotive industry? Is it the big switch to EVs?
Well, now they are pinched by many different factors. Going into the current era, you can say that they were a little bit behind the gun on electrification, especially with the EV shift. That was especially the case with Nissan, which didn't have a proper lineup of hybrid vehicles for critical markets like the United States. But more recently, going into 2025, where they really face pressure is from the trade tumult that's been unleashed by the Trump administration's tariffs in the United States. And that is putting huge pressures and big uncertainties on all of the Japanese car makers here. Nissan, of course, is among them.
And we saw last week British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer managed to get a tariff deal with the US and specifically get that tariff down on cars. Is Japan making big efforts to do the same?
Yes, they are making a full court press against the United States to try to really dial down or eliminate the tariffs on the automotive sector in particular. I would say that, I mean, the auto industry here is the absolute pillar of the economy, and it's a global player on a scale probably much larger than the industry in the UK. So it's very crucial to the Japanese economy that they have a free trade on those kind of products. How successful they will be is another question, but that is the goal, at least, of the government here.
And is there still a lot of fallout from the breakdown of partnership negotiations with Honda for Nissan?
Well, I don't know how much fallout there is right now. I think what you see across the landscape here in Japan's automotive industry is that the companies are kind of just mired in their own world of hurt because of the trade tariffs, and they are working on basically solving their own situation and their own problems and maintaining their own business structure for the time being. And maybe after they write their own ships and keep things in order and have some transparency about which way the industry will go, then they can come back and work on perhaps revisiting some kind of partnerships. In the meantime, I think Nissan is looking for partners along the way, and it hasn't ruled out necessarily working with Honda in one fashion or another. But at this point, I wouldn't expect any kind of a revisiting of their integration plans anytime soon.
And the notable aspects of their Nissan restructuring plan mentioned that we'll see factories closing and job cutting. Do we know whereabouts the workforce is going to be hit around the globe?
Well, they said that they would basically dial up the job cuts from 9,000 that were previously announced to 20,000 worldwide. And these would be spread over, let's say, the next couple of years through the fiscal year ending in March 2028. So you have a long lead time, really, to get rid of these jobs one way or the other through closures, early retirements, buyouts, you name it. And they will also be closing some factories or consolidating some production sites. They did not say in particular where they were going to do this, but you could maybe guess that some plants are more insulated from the sites of these actions than others. The UK has the Sunderland plant, for example, which is their only production base in Europe, and it has already a lot of big investments made there in electrification and electric vehicles. So it's, I would say, unlikely that they would make big cuts in Sunderland. Meanwhile, in the United States, where they have very, very large production bases already, you might think that those would be ripe for some kind of cutbacks, and maybe they would, but suddenly the United States being able to make cars in the United States is at a premium, so because of the tariffs. So in order to dodge those tariffs, Nissan, like other companies, will be looking to build up as much product in the United States as possible, and that gives perhaps those U.S. factories an extra lease on life.
Hans Grommel, thank you. You're listening to Monocle Radio. Now, Slovakia has been playing host to the Starts with Children Summit this week, focusing on putting children at the centre of urban planning. Monocle's team behind The Urbanist has been at the event's second edition, speaking with the experts who are making our cities better for future generations. Carlota Rebello is Monocle's senior foreign correspondent. She joins us now from the Slovakian capital. Carlota, what's it like there?
It's been amazing so far. First of all, the weather has been fantastic. It's been so sunny, despite being crisp still. And, the summit is completely sold out. So it's quite an amazing crowd from all over the world. Of course, a lot of representatives from Central Europe, which is always amazing to hear about the fantastic projects that they're doing. But the fact that this event is taking place in the old market hall that just a decade ago was, pretty much misused and underused, really. And now it's been transformed into this real hub for the community. So of course there's no market during the summit, but it's been incredible just to see how a city icon can be transformed and used not just as a market but as a venue, as a place for people to come together and chat and speak to one another.
And what's the focus of everyone there in Bratislava?
So, as you mentioned, this is the second edition of the summit. And last year, there was a big focus on streets and mobility. So this year, it's about the home and its surroundings. So homes and houses are spaces that really influence children's health, their development, their sense of belonging, even sense of belonging to a city. So it is about shaping neighborhoods and creating communities that thrive. That's the main theme of this whole affair. And at the end of the day, it's really about deciding and discovering how urban planning can support thriving, inclusive communities. And that starts with, the city's youngest residents, because at the end of the day, it's that idea that if you build a city that's good for children, it is a city that's good for everyone. It is more accessible, more inclusive, and a fairer city too.
And why is child-friendly design a good strategy for a city? What have you learned?
Yeah, this is an amazing program because, here in Bratislava, they started this City for Children program 3 years ago. And it was a simple ambition, for example, to improve the surroundings of 34 schools and create an area that was safe for children to go to school without fearing for cars. Maybe they could walk, they could cycle, etc. And so far, it has impacted nearly 15,000 children. And that's just one project. So it really has highlighted by putting child-focused planning at the center of design, at the center of how we think about cities, you actually calm things down for everyone else. Caregivers, traditionally women, tend to do more trips throughout the day because they go pick up kids from school, drop them off, go to the shopping, etc. How do you do that in a car that's infested by cars, in a city that's infested by cars, for example? So when you control that, when you impose traffic calming solutions, with children in mind, you're also helping another sector of society. The same with accessibility. And here, in the case of housing, it's not just about access to housing, but incorporating public spaces, playgrounds, parks, and these need to come with facilities too. We've often debated about the lack of facilities in public parks across Europe, across the world. And, you need to have that to allow people to actually feel like they can enjoy these spaces for long periods of time. So those are just some of the ways in which, by putting child-friendly design at the center of it all, can actually help cities for everyone.
And yesterday was day one. Who were the key speakers and what were the themes?
There were a couple of key speakers yesterday, and we heard right at the start of the day from the mayor of Bratislava, Matúš Valu, who really has been the one at the helm of this transformation here in the city and this development to create a neighborhood where everyone feels nurtured. We also heard about Petra Marko, who's the CEO of the Metropolitan Institute of Bratislava, and talking really about this idea of housing and neighborhoods, rethinking what that means with children in mind, and putting children at the center of the design brief when meeting with developers, when meeting with other architects. And then there was a really amazing presentation by Adam Jebrian, and he's an author and an architecture critic. And he did this experiment with his own son, where for 3 months he took off work and he just traveled around the city of Barcelona with his son, who was 7 years old at the time. So he did his presentation about seeing the city through his son's eyes. And it's so amazing in those photos, in those videos that he shared, how things that we adults wouldn't pay attention to became the biggest source of joy for this family. You know, an accessibility ramp going into a small church in the middle of the city became a ramp for him to play with cars for about an hour. And it's things like that in our day to day. You know, we lost a lot of touch with our inner child. So that it's things like that in our day to day that really show how sometimes seeing cities through someone else's perspective allows you to also see the built environment, how it could improve and how it could work better for everyone.
And you were moderating yourself on stage. Tell us about that. One of the panels struck me, kids' online and offline worlds.
Yes, that was a really interesting discussion because this relationship between the healthy relationship between technology and childhood is something we talk a lot about. We talk about a lot the screen time and how kids are not playing outside. But actually what came out in this panel is that often when given the choice, kids are going to choose to go outside. They are going to choose to play in real life. So is this a conversation about, of course, there is the element of the addictive tools that a lot of the online platforms have, etc. But also at the same time, are we building cities that are conducive for children to feel safe outside versus, being indoors, playing games and being okay, or being outside dodging cars? Which one would a child immediately gravitate to? So it was a really interesting discussion about, the role that both health and both tech and urban planning can have in children's health and in their well-being and their development. And then there was, of course, a big debate about, social media and the ethics behind it all. When we have young children from sometimes the age of 6 or 7 already creating profiles in social media accounts, who owns that data? So it was a really interesting discussion. And I think what emerged is that screen time is more of a symptom than really a cause for the lack of playing outside.
Carlotta, thank you. That was Monocle's senior foreign correspondent, Carlotta Rebello. This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
There's a craft to every question, which is why at UBS, we query every aspect of the market, working with specialized experts and award-winning research teams, covering over 3,500 stocks in 50 countries, all delivered in a comprehensive library, answering what you want with what you need. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Now, in many ways, Switzerland is the true home of the Eurovision Song Contest. It is coordinated by the Geneva-headquartered European Broadcasting Union, the EBU, and Switzerland hosted and won the first edition in 1956. But at the helm of this rather Swiss enterprise is in fact a rather dapper Swede. You might recognise Eurovision's executive supervisor Martin Osterdahl. On finals night, he announces when the votes have been counted. But this moment in the spotlight is the culmination of months of behind-the-scenes grunt work getting Eurovision, still the world's most watched non-sporting TV event, shipshape and sparkling. Martin speaks with Monocle Radio senior correspondent Fernando Augusto Pacheco on the complexities of hosting an event like this.
What we do, a large part of what we do is the knowledge transfer from each year. So how to set up and organize what is the world's largest music event and arguably most complex TV production. So that's what the executive supervisor does, most days of the year. I have the experience of producing the show. Me and my team work on this every year, so we make sure that the new host broadcaster gets all the information they need in a timely manner to organize this. Because we have a very unique hosting model. If you compare us to other big international events, we have the model that if you win it, you host it. It's super, super unique. And you don't have much time. You need to start straight away. So we take the Monday off after the grand final, and then we start again on Tuesday because you'd have no time to lose. When I compare this to, I used to be a commissioning editor of entertainment and sports programming at SVT before, and I was involved with a lot of host broadcasting project on the sports side. And if you compare this to a World Championships in skiing, for instance, the Eurovision Song Contest is now much bigger and much more complex. And if you're the host broadcaster for a ski World Championships, you know that 5 years in advance normally. And you have a national federation, you have an international federation, and you can plan with the region a number of years before the event is actually takes place. In the Eurovision, that's not the case. You win it on a Monday night, and you get an envelope from the executive supervisor saying, congratulations, you've won. You're expected to put all this together a year from now, and it goes out live to hundreds of millions of people. It's quite a daunting task to be the host broadcaster. So what we start with on the Tuesday after the grand final is, of course, to prepare for the host city selection, because that's the first thing that needs to be put in place. So we help the host broadcaster to put together what we call a request for information that goes out to cities, to the cities that are interested. So it's cities and regions normally. And that's a long list of stuff, that needs to be put together. And then we ask them to come in with the replies to that request for information, and then we try and then each host broadcaster does that slightly differently year from year. It's either a very open and transparent sort of bidding process, and go on site visits, and sometimes it's more sort of an internal discussion and selection. So it's different in terms of how it's done, but we are always involved from the EBU side, supporting that process, and ultimately also approving the final decision of the city and the venue. And we need the city, we need the venue to start, because everything in the Eurovision Song Contest starts from the stage in terms of production. So the stage is like the script of our movie, if you like. And before you have the script to the movie, you can't do all the other things, right? So for us, it's the arena, it's the stage, and then we can start with everything else that needs to be put in place. So that's the summertime. That's what we do in the summer. and ideally, we know where we are, we know in which arena we're in, and what it looks like by August, September.
And it's funny, we'll go to the next topic soon, but about cities as well. Do you feel that you don't necessarily go to the biggest city or to the capital traditionally? Is this a way as well for soft power for those perhaps smaller cities as well? We've seen that with Liverpool in the UK, which was fantastic as well. We're seeing this with Basel now.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just the venue that we need. We need so much more. We need a lot of hotel rooms. We need, in the Eurovision Song Contest every year, if you look at the accreditation system we have, that we accredit people with badges to access the venue and the other secure locations, we typically print about 10 or 11,000 badges for people. So that's the amount of people that come in and do something in order to put this all in place. So it employs every year about 10,000 people, which is quite massive, and something that people at home in front of the television perhaps do not realize. So yeah, we do need a lot of hotel rooms. And we need an international airport reasonably close by, and a lot of other things. The special thing about Eurovision compared to other big shows is that the challenge for us is also, in terms of crowd management, is not front of stage or the access of the audience, it's the backstage area. Close to the arena, there needs to be a massive area for the delegations, so where we have the changing rooms for up to 26 delegations who are, maybe 20, 25 people each. They need to have hair and makeup. They need to have a facility to organize their costumes. There needs to be a massive prop storage area. There needs to be the logistics behind stage are quite extraordinary. When we produced Eurovision Song Contest in Malmö 2013, I remember that the last big show before us was Lady Gaga's World Tour, which at that time was the biggest tour. And I think Lady Gaga came in with something like 30 semi-trailers of stuff, of technology and props, and we had 97. And now I think we're over 200. So 200 trailers of stuff come into a venue, and you need a traffic manager just to manage, or a group, traffic management group that just takes care of the loading in and loading out and storing all these things, because Lady Gaga has one act and lots of variations to that act, but we have
That was Martin Osterdahl, Eurovision's executive supervisor. You can read the full interview with him on monocle.com and stay tuned to Monocle Radio this week for more Eurovision content. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Well, it's time to talk fashion now with Natalie Theodosi, Monocle's fashion editor. Natalie, thanks very much for joining us this morning. And there's a change on the rules at the Cannes Film Festival.
Yeah, it's true. And to be honest with you, I wasn't that surprised because it's something that Cannes has been doing and has over the years made some controversial statements. I think about 10 years ago, they had turned some actresses down for not wearing high heels. I think they've banned selfies because the president of the festival called it grotesque. And now they are changing the dress code or adding some extra rules that ban, they say, nudity or very voluminous dresses and gowns. And part of it is a practical reason. They've talked about kind of making sure the flow of guests, because it is thousands of people that go through the Palais during those screenings, can move easily. The nudity statement is slightly different. I think there has been a trend of very sheer, almost like pretty nude dresses that a lot of the actresses have been embracing the last few years. So they're really making a statement against that and trying to put a stop to it. In some ways, I think that it's interesting that they're so specific about their vision, and that's what makes the Cannes Film Festival what it is. But at the same time, it is a bit of a controversial statement to make, to try and police what actresses are wearing and impose such strict dress codes. And as always, it's divisive, and it's a conversation that's going on this year.
And also, it's slightly short notice, right, for any actresses attending the festival. They will have been talking to designers, presumably, for weeks, if not months, about what they're going to wear.
Exactly. I mean, to be fair, these things happen a lot more last minute than we would imagine, and they have millions of options. So I don't think anyone will run out of options of something to wear. It's more, I think, the principle of telling these women what they are and aren't allowed to wear.
And designers have been receiving awards from the British Fashion Council.
Yes, so it was a very happy day, I think, yesterday for the British Fashion Council and the London industry in general, which has had a bit of a slump the last 2 years after Brexit and COVID particularly. But there is a new CEO at the British Fashion Council and a slightly more optimistic outlook. And yesterday, the British Fashion Council and Vogue has an annual award that is given to a young designer alongside financial support to kind of give them a boost to keep going. And it was given to Connor Ives, who's an incredible American-born, London-based designer. And he has always worked with upcycled fabrics. He has studied at St. Martin's and really stuck to his philosophy of working with upcycling and managed to still make a business out of it. And then on the same day, Patrick McDowell, another designer who's working with very limited made-to-order garments, got the Queen Elizabeth II award from the Princess of Wales in a morning ceremony on the Strand. So it's happy news, and it's interesting to see that the designers getting the awards are working with slightly different business model and smaller quantities made to measure versus the traditional ready-to-wear model that they used to have to adhere to.
And finally, just briefly, lots of us are booking our summer holidays at the moment, and so are the fashion brands.
Yeah, I mean, this is a time when everyone wants to go travel to the south. And I mean, there's always the destination shows that everyone is waiting for. Chanel was in Como a few weeks ago. Dior is traveling to Rome. But I think the retailers are embracing this idea of travel and creating experiences. And I've been seeing My Teresa, the Munich-based retailer, take its VIP customers and friends to Venice to launch a special collaboration with the brand Double J. Net-a-Porter partnered with another brand, The Elder Statesman from LA, to travel to the south of France. And yeah, it's beautiful experiences, but it also goes to show that retail, even these businesses are mostly online, but they're still investing in getting people together in person.
Natalie Theodosi, Monocle's fashion editor, thank you for joining us here on The Globalist. That's all for today's programme. Thank you to our producers, Monica Lillis and Anita Riota, our researcher, Francesca Gilt, and our studio manager, Flynn Simons. After the headlines, there's more music on the way. The briefing is live at midday, London time. The Globalist returns at the same time with me tomorrow. I'm Vincent McAviney. Thank you for tuning in.